this is something that means a lot to me. So I know I've already sent out and so thank you for being here to just even, take part in this discussion. And I've already sent out the PowerPoint, but I wanted to just run through it quickly because I want to share my heart, and then I want to give you guys a chance to share your heart and thoughts. Because this really isn't as anything that most of us are doing. It's not going to change something in my life, but I just want to see if we can go somewhere with this. So National Traffic Safety Ombudsman. A lot of us are here. We're trying to turn tragedy into advocacy. And so really we're coming together in many ways across this nation on a mission to make our roads safer. So why do we need a National Traffic Safety Ombudsman if we do? Despite the fact that some have acknowledged it as a public health problem, we've yet to do it as a nation as a whole. And in many times when when change is trying to be made, there's cost benefit analysis that it gets done that leaves makes other things more of a priority than saving lives. And I think that a traffic safety ombudsman could help to change that. But actually there are numerous organizations out there working on traffic safety issues. Do we really need another? Even just in the work that I've done as a volunteer, I've benefited from many organizations that are also trying to do some of the same things that I am. But is there someone that's actually working as a traffic safety ombudsman who's an advocate for traffic safety as a cohesive whole? And I'm probably crazy to even do this because I'm probably stepping on toes. In 2017, I wrote a proposal for the Road to Zero Coalition grant proposal program. And one of the things that I proposed was this traffic safety ombudsman program. The reason I got into this, of course, was because of my daughters, Annalie and Mary, and the tragedy that took their lives, and then got embarked upon trying to make change through petitioning DOT, going to talk to Secretary Fox, then trying to, drafting legislation for underrides. Even Lois and I, organizing an underride crash test in DC to bring the solutions right to Washington. What we quickly learned is that Executive Order 12866, which calls for a cost benefit analysis as part of rulemaking, like I said earlier, tends to too easily indicate that the change is not cost effective, that the cost per life saved is too much, and things get held up. So when I realized that, I launched an online petition, for a Vision Zero policy. And sorry about that. One of the things we wanted to seeing that was a change in rulemaking policy away from a cost benefit model to a more humanistic, rational Vision Zero safety strategy. And I know that cost benefit is important and it can help to justify the need. But I've asked, is it truly taking the needs, making human life the high priority? So one of the things that I, after doing that, is I one day woke up and said, you know, maybe a traffic safety ombudsman is the missing puzzle here. And I did that because I had okay, so an ombudsman being a public advocate, somebody with a significant degree of dependence who's charged with representing the interests of the public. And I started to think, well, could this actually be a missing piece of the puzzle? Could a traffic safety ombudsman develop, refine, and pursue a national Vision Zero goal? Could they oversee a White House Vision Zero task force? Could they be the watchdog to make sure that a Vision Zero rulemaking were carried out? And one thing that I noticed about that time was that President Obama was speaking about gun violence at a town hall. And when I listened to him, I was a little disturbed. Oops, I don't think I have the sound shared. Nope.
Hillary want to control and restrict and limit gun manufacture.
And at no, so it's just not true. What I have said is precisely what you suggested, which is why don't we treat this like every other thing that we use? We used to have really bad auto fatality rates. The auto fatality rate has actually dropped precipitously, drastically since I was a kid. Why is that? We decided we had seatbelt laws. We decided to have manufacturers put airbags in place. We decided to crack down on drunk driving and texting. We decided to redesign roads so that they were less likely to have a car bank. We studied what is causing these fatalities using science and data and evidence, and then we slowly treated it like the public health problem it was, and it got reduced.
Okay, so that's, you know, actually, that did happen, right? A lot of things were done. It improved, like even with cars and how much safer they are today, more crash worthy. But it kind of bothered me that he would say that that as if it was all over with. We used to have really bad auto fatality rates. And it got reduced. So the question in my mind was, have we solved the traffic safety problem, traffic violence problem? If not, are we satisfied with things, how they're progressing? What other alternatives might therefore be bringing about change? And one thing I thought of was a nationwide network of community traffic safety advocacy groups. One thing that having participated in things like Road to Zero Coalition. And I just felt like as a family member of someone who was lost, I was kind of the minority in, a world of traffic safety professionals, and traffic safety professionals are important, and they're very necessary. But I think that we lose something if we don't harness the energy of those who have lost loved ones to take action. So Dwight Eisenhower, I discovered one time, actually was a big champion for, auto safety. And he saw that getting the public involved, he thought that was very important. He thought of having community groups established that could, help to push change. And that sounded to me kind of like a National Vision Zero goal and a nationwide network of community traffic safety action groups. So what would be different about an ombudsman? What are some of the pros and cons of this? I had somebody say to me that it would be better use of our time to sway the people that already have power than create some position that would take years to create, and then there would be no guarantee who would be hired for that. So after I get done with my spiel here, I want us to take some time to actually brainstorm together about what we would want the role of it to look like, even if it was something. And where should it be housed? Should it be in the office of the secretary? Should it be outside of DOT? Should there be a White House Vision Zero task force? How I met with a few people earlier this week, and a question that came up was, how would we preserve the independence of that role? What would be needed to bring about a National Vision Zero goal, a White House Vision Zero task force? And this is something that when I launched that Vision Zero petition in 2015 and 16, these were some of the things that I brainstormed about. And the idea of establishing a White House task force to protect road users from traffic crashes. And I wrote up a presidential memorandum. I wanted to do their work for them. And then one day I'm a graduate of University of Michigan, so I get their newsletter, and they had something on about how JFK had stopped at University of Michigan when he was campaigning. And when I was a little girl, he actually came in my hometown, Grand Rapids, Michigan, too, and came by on the train. And so I remembered that. And then, so I listened to him. And this was when he actually launched the Peace Corps and Vista Volunteers.
Doctors are willing to spend your days in Ghana, technicians or engineers? How many of you are willing to work in the foreign service and spend your lives traveling around the world? And I think Americans are willing to contribute, but the effort must be far greater than we've ever made in the past.
Sorry. So, no, I'm kind of rambling here, but this was something that when I, today's March 19th, and I don't know if some of you have seen this, that I put on social media a lot, that on this day in 1969, DOT said they were going to add side guards to large trucks, and they still haven't done it 52 years ago. But on this day as well, is my wedding anniversary. I've been married 16,071 days, or 44 years, and it's been 18,993 days since DOT said they were going to do that. And so I'm real cognizant of that fact. But another thing is that so I got married. Just, that was like a long time ago, spring chicken, right? I worked at just a few weeks or so after I was like, got married spring break, my senior year of college. And then I saw an ad in the paper for a VISTA volunteer, which is, the US version of the Peace Corps. And I applied for it and I got it. And I worked for, dirt cheap, and became a chapter director of a nursing home patient advocacy organization. And I learned how to be an advocate, and that kind of set the stage for the things I'm doing today. But, back then we didn't have this technology we do today. I even took I made our stationery with, pressed, I don't even remember what it's called, but anyway, things have progressed since then. But the nursing home ombudsman, they what they did was they were advocating for people who didn't have a voice for themselves, and they were teaching other people how to be advocates. And what I'm envisioning is something like that. That JFK launched, the Peace Corps. The VISTA volunteers could be involved in helping to organize community traffic safety groups across the nation, and working with people like, I know I talked to Amy Cohen on Monday, working with groups like Families for Safe Streets. And I noticed this tweet this morning that Secretary Pete wrote: "It's really mattered more to be willing to bring your talent to public service. I want to see the kinds of people who went to NASA in the 60s and Silicon Valley in the 90s coming into public service now." And I thought, wow, that's kind of like what I feel like, that people could be doing that, harness the energy of college students to work dirt cheap and get some goals. So this is an idea that I had. Okay, so because I know that VISTA volunteer, you can get grants for, nonprofits. So let's say that the 441 congressional districts each had a VISTA volunteer be a traffic safety ombudsman coordinator. So every congressional district in the United States would have a traffic safety group, and they'd have a VISTA volunteer to work with people in their community about traffic safety issues, and be a direct funnel to their US representative to let them know what they wanted done. I don't know how many of you have tried to, work with your representative. And Eric was just saying, Lois and Eric and I had a meeting with, he wasn't our representative, but it's like pulling teeth, right? To get them to do what you want them to do. And then that would be $6 million, and 51 state traffic safety ombudsman coordinators at, let's say, $30,000 a year. That'd be 1,530,000. One national traffic safety coordinator for, let's say, 150,000. I'm just throwing these figures out here. I know that's about what VISTA volunteer gives their volunteers. So that'd be 8,295,000. Toss in some extra costs, that'd be $10 million a year. You know what a value of statistical life is for lost life? 9.6 million. Could we put that much towards it? Anyway, that's my dream. How should we petition for it? Should we send a request to Biden, to Buttigieg? Should we get congressional leadership to put it into the infrastructure bill? What would be included in it? So that's all. In fact, in 2019, I wrote up a National Traffic Safety Act, and I included an ombudsman, and I took all the different legislation that had been introduced that seemed to me to be related to this, and put it together in one package. You know, we had 66, we had the Motor Vehicle Safety Act. I think it's time for a new one. Okay, so now I have got, let's see, let's end that. Whoops. Okay, so let me try and stop this. Okay, get that done. I always have trouble with this. And show. Okay, now I have got okay, when I was just starting work, I had a newsprint. Did any of you ever use newsprint? So I've got some of these questions here, and I want you people to start getting yourself off mute, and I'd like some reactions. Thoughts. What would be some of the pros and cons? Do we even need it? Why are you here today? Amy, you want to?
I'll jump in.
Okay.
Hi, it's nice to meet you all. My name is Amy Cohen, and I'm one of the co-founders of Families for Safe Streets. We started in New York City, and now we have chapters forming across the country. We're in 10 states. And what I joined today because I really believe that our collective power as people who've been personally impacted and others who are willing to join with us is the only thing that's going to make it possible for us to make change. I mean, I'm horrified by the quote that you shared, Marianne, about they promised, what was it, 1969 to put sidewalks on? I mean, I think that's a testament to why we need grassroots advocacy, and we need, as our mission states, to confront the preventable epidemic of traffic violence, because being nice hasn't worked, and we need to stand up and push back. And I know that's what many of you who are on this call that I haven't met before, have been doing for a long time. I think we'll be more effective when we can come together, and push. And so I know Heidi Simon is on the call as well from the Road to Zero Coalition. FSS has joined with the Road to Zero Coalition and the Vision Zero Network to push for a call from a commitment from the Biden administration towards zero traffic deaths. And I think that's, an important starting point, and it's just the beginning of really getting some federal leadership that has been lacking on this issue. And, where an ombudsman fits within that call to action, I think there are pros and cons. I think there is a need for a national movement. We are, not really quite to that, a national movement leading victim-led voices, providing support, which we do in New York and in some of our other chapters, and helping navigate the systems, as well as harnessing these voices and helping people speak out and demand change. Whether that ombudsman, my initial reaction, we are not housed within government because the government is the target of who we're trying to change, and if they pay for the staff and they pay for the program, they're not going to really be energizing people to push for policies that they're not ready yet to make, that they've been committing to since 1969 for underguards, for example. So I see that as a big challenge of what you're proposing.
Well, but what if it was not in the government? I mean, that's part of the question, where should it be located?
Mm-hmm. I think that that's a criteria that it would have to be outside of government. And I think also just in terms of timing, is this something that comes, before or after, or as part of, the commitment that needs to be made from the top, how is it that we as a nation have not adopted Vision Zero? It really just is astonishing whether you call it towards zero deaths, zero traffic deaths, or Vision Zero. That seems to me to be the first step we need to make.
Okay, so what would it look like? Okay, so let's say Biden would say, okay, we need to set a national Vision Zero goal. And then what would it look like? What would it change? What would be done differently? These are the kinds of questions I've asked myself, what would it, go ahead now.
Well, I don't need to be the only one to answer that, and I'd certainly be happy to defer to Heidi. But we came together in New York City at the time where Mayor de Blasio ran for office on a commitment of adopting Vision Zero. So that was really only the beginning of the work. Then it's really making sure the implementation of a safe systems approach and doubling down on what works, really pushing for all those changes and helping elevate the voices of people who've been personally impacted like we have to making sure those changes get put in place. And I do also think government has a moral obligation for supporting crash victims because, it is the lack of attention on the issue that is made our club so big.
Anybody else? Thank you, Amy.
I will just share on the zero traffic deaths campaign. We are just gearing up to potentially doing a big sort of, lobby phone calling tactic coming up. And anyway, so I'd love to be able to reach out to everybody and just share more on that when we have more information. And I hope you'll get involved in that as well.
Possible, what were you saying?
As part of our push for zero traffic deaths, we've been, sharing stories through op-eds and videos that people are making, calling on Biden and Buttigieg to commit to zero traffic deaths. And our next tactic will be like a legislative call-in / lobby, a tactic coming up, still being details we are working out, but in the next couple of weeks. So if everybody's okay with that, I'll reach out and share more as we have it.
Okay, thank you.
And I think that's what we need to make sure that we're doing. This is Melissa Wandel, and I'm in Florida, and I've been doing advocacy now for almost 18 years, as my husband was taken by a red light runner. And so I think it's what I've seen over it is there's so many great, like the organizations that Amy's working with right now that we support through the National Coalition for Safer Roads. And Marianne, I've always supported you as well. Even though we haven't met, I've always supported your work. I think it's just everybody coming together as one voice, which we've been trying to do for so long. And even through what you're doing here, Marianne, and what through Amy's doing, I think that we all just collectively work together. It's going to have that one voice in DC, and you're going to be able to we all want zero, obviously. But I think we all just have to do it together. And I think that is the start of that today by having this meeting.
I don't know if it would take too much time, but it'd be great to just, hear from everyone just who you are and how you came to this work. And so I did introduce myself. I didn't share that. I lost my 12-year-old son 7 years ago.
How do we get a legislator, a senator, a congressman, representative? I think that's the key is we need somebody that's in Washington to support us, to champion us.
Kathy, you want to go ahead and share why you're here today?
Hi, I'm Kathy. I lost my sister and my niece to an underride. A guy pulled down onto a highway and they went right under the tanker truck. They never saw him. It was pitch black at night and his tanker was dark blue, no lights on the side, and they were killed instantly.
So you're saying, in terms of representatives, what is your, you want to say a little bit more about that?
I don't know how to get somebody to champion us. That's, I understand we need to champion it, but we need someone in Washington that will, we need a representative.
Because without having a champion, you can't get your bill introduced, and in order to get a legislative change, is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Mhm. I don't mean to put anybody in the spot. Does anyone else want to share why they're here? And
I'll jump in, Marianne.
okay, thanks, Eric.
Good morning. I'm Eric Hine. I lost my 16-year-old son, Riley, to an underride crash in New Mexico in 2015. He was on his way to high school and ended up underneath a utility trailer reefer, and he burned to death. So I've been working with Marianne and Lois for a couple of years now. I also litigated utility trailer and won a $42 million jury verdict against the trailer manufacturer for being negligent in Riley's death. So we're continuing to push up underride guards. I agree with you, Amy. I think this needs to be somebody outside of the government. We really have sort of scratched our heads, at least with underrides, and I'm sure all of the, Vision Zero. Where does that champion come from? Is it a celebrity? Is it somebody that has some personal loss issues, like Marissa Hardigay, losing her mom, Jane Mansfield, or is it somebody else that can help us take that torch? Because trying to get a representative to be our champion, as we're finding out, is so difficult to do. And there's so many things being tossed at each of our elected officials that it's hard for them to grasp something like this. I think the idea is really forward-looking, Marianne. I love it. But the challenge is going to be who do we find to take this? Pick up the torch and move it forward with all of us collectively behind them.
You mean in terms of if it were to be introduced as a bill, you mean?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's going to take somebody outside with some clout, sort of embarrassing almost members of Congress to get them to latch onto this, like, public service announcements, those kinds of things that can be hugely impactful. But it's hard to figure out who that would be and whom they might target of our elected officials, whether it's Biden or Buttigieg or just going to members of Congress.
So if it was outside of the government, where would that be? Are we talking about like a new nonprofit or some existing organization?
Yeah, I don't know. That's the challenge to try to figure out.
Mm-hmm. I mean, here's where I'm stepping on foot. I mean, I'm sure there's a lot of organizations that that rightly view themselves as advocates, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So is there any need for something different? I don't know. I mean, I know what I think, but anybody else?
Yeah, Marianne, I'd like to chime in here. I'm Mike Hawkins. I was involved in a front underride crash 17 years ago that should have killed me, but it didn't. And I've been involved with the truck safety and now underrides advocacy. And Marianne, by the way, I sent you an email with something that I like to point out that truck safety has done, where they've, I always like the KISS method, keep it simple, where they've narrowed it down to 4 items for that people need to be aware of. Because I'm all about truck safety, because the deaths are actually increasing between large trucks and automobiles through the years. And I agree. I think Eric's on to something here with like public service announcements. Until everyone understands, and I've said this before, when they get in their car and they turn on the ignition and they leave their house, to get them think that it might be the last time they see their house when they pull away. Until we can change, make trucks safer, and a number of other issues that are on that truck safety email that I sent you, Mary Ann. Until the general public, everybody knows it, I don't think anything will ever, nothing has changed in 17 years I've been an advocate. It's only gotten worse. But I think you're onto something, Eric, there with the public service announcement. I really like that idea.
I'm Steve Eimers. My daughter was eviscerated by a defective and fraudulent tested guardrail. She's one of 70. I come from a more libertarian background, and I went around the federal government, and I got all 50 state DOTs to follow my lead, every single provincial DOT. I think Eric is onto something with the $42 million judgment. I think a lot of our focus needs to be on tort reform, going after organizations like ALEC that are putting in artificial limits on liability. And I think litigation works. And I think us tracking down victims and encouraging them to file litigation is helpful. I think one thing we could do with the government is, and I've done this as I advocate, is making almost a database of congressmen, senators. We know the president has suffered loss himself, state legislators. I found that when they know the pain of being the parent of a lost child or a spouse or a loved one, they listen more intently. So I think creating a database of leaders that have suffered loss could be helpful.
What would we do with that?
We know they're more likely to be a potential ally.
When we want to get something introduced or something, or change, just
Yeah,
approach them.
exactly. They're always the first ones I try to approach because they know. And you have an instant connection with them. You can ask them about their, you ask in Tennessee, the transportation chair had lost his son. Rather than get into my advocacy work immediately, I began asking him questions about his son, and we created a connection. But I think that you mentioned the issue with the underrides since 1960. I've seen the same thing with Federal Highway, and we talked about the road to zero. One of the most embarrassing things was I was talking with the executive director of the Federal Highway Administration, and he went on and on about this road to zero, road to zero, road to zero. And then at the very end, he said, but it's not realistic. And he put a bunch of qualifiers on it. I just wanted to, anyways, I'll leave it at that.
If I could jump in, I'm Harry Adler from the Institute for Safer Trucking. We work with families and survivors of large truck crashes. And I think there were a couple of items that, Mary Ann included in her PowerPoint that we could focus on in the short term and hopefully get some action on. And one of those issues is value of statistical life. For those of you who know, it wasn't raised once in the past administration. So as I've been putting it, life essentially got cheaper. But I think that's a really good action we could take, where it would be, sending a letter to Secretary Buttigieg and, whenever she's confirmed, Deputy Secretary Trottenberg, to say, hey, it's time to increase the value of statistical life for the past couple of years. That will help with, some of the rulemakings that we're, hopeful will start, whether it's underride or any of the other safety technologies. So I think that's an item where we could, focus in with this group, get a letter together, and have an action where, we could start on something while we sort of figure out the larger workings of whether, the traffic ombudsman and some of these other discussions. But like that was an item I saw where we could have immediate action in the form of a letter and hopefully get somewhat of an immediate response from the DOT. So I think an item like that. I would also say, like, I think it's important as it relates to getting champions on the Hill. It's important to educate members. So, that's obviously in the form of email and outreach. And we have an advocacy center on our site. We've updated the underride section to reflect the newly introduced Stop Underrides bill. So I think, taking advantage of tools like that, where we've tried to make it really easy for people to advocate. So they can send that message in through email. They can actually call in, and we've set it up where, you just put in your number and it patches you through to the offices. And so we're open to also feedback from this group, if there's, language or a fact that you guys don't see in there and think would make that advocacy page even better. Let us know and we can update it. But we've set that up. So I think using tools like that to focus on some of the legislation that's been introduced and hopefully some legislation that will be introduced will also be a helpful tool in making sure that the members on the Hill know about it and also are hearing from their constituents about, items like underride, automatic emergency braking, speed limiters, increasing minimum insurance. We're hopeful that given the composition of Congress, we can make action on these items. And so I think focusing in on those, using some of the tools that, we've set up could be helpful in this effort of just trying to raise more awareness and identify some of those champions on the Hill.
Okay, so thanks, Harry. So that's specifically related to truck safety advocacy. And when I discovered that tool, I went ahead and put a link to it on our website, on our how you can help page, because I think that was real valuable, given an easy way for people to, send out an email without having to start from scratch themselves. So I don't know, maybe something, maybe that just brings to mind, maybe have a joint website where we put tools like that for not only truck safety, but other things as well. That would be something we could do jointly, right?
Yes, and Marianne, if I can say something, if you don't mind, and Harry, you brought up a lot of great points, and that's a lot of great things that already the National Safety Council is doing along with Families for Safe Streets. And that's why if everybody can sign that petition, it's bringing us all together. If they're already doing that work and already trying to get that push to Biden. So if we can join that and everybody just sign that petition, they've already started that movement. All we have to do is just sign on and get involved and be that national voice. And I know either Amy or Heidi, if you want to just tell everybody how to sign that petition real quick, you'd be able to, it's just an easy step in things they've already done. And then we can move forward with these other tasks that we want to get done. But if there's things already being done, we don't have to reinvent the wheel.
So can you
put the website and our social media hashtag in the chat? It's just zerotrafficdeaths.org. And you just, just click sign the letter to President Biden. You can see who signed it already. We have hundreds of organizations. It's really building a movement, both of, individuals, but also we have folks like the Chamber of Commerce and the NRDC, really trying to build our movement out with other voices coming to the table. And so as Melissa said, yeah, there's no need to reinvent the wheel. It would be great to just join on this burgeoning push.
So can I ask you to elaborate on, like, with this petition to Biden, what is he being asked to specifically do?
So you can read more on the website. There are 4 things that we're saying are part of the, essential call to committing to zero traffic deaths. It is doubling, it's the Road to Zero report items. It's making Road to Zero report a reality. It's doubling down on what works, investing in safe systems, investing in life-saving technology. Part of the doubling down on what works, just to be clear, is also tying federal dollars, transportation dollars to changes in state policy that are prioritizing safety over speed and saving lives. And the fourth is a new component that really was not in the Road to Zero report, which is supporting crash victims. So it does get to your sort of ombudsman idea.
And how do you visualize them supporting crash victims? Or what are you asking him to
We
do?
have not elaborated that yet. We have some, thoughts on it. There's something we're actually tackling in New York as sort of a pilot to it. There is something, if you're familiar with the Crime Victims Bill of Rights, it was established in 1984 under Ronald Reagan, and it created restitution and legal rights for victims of crime. So it's basically what, enabled MAD to do their, have a victim impact statement if the driver is charged with being drunk, as well as all other kinds of crime. The challenge is I don't know about for the folks on this call, but if the driver was not charged, which is, very frequently the case, particularly if the driver was sober and stayed on the scene, then, then family members get no support and no compensation. And so one thing we're pushing for in New York State is a crash victims Bill of Rights to create a comparable program to the federal program. We're starting in New York State as a model. We're pushing for it for this legislation, and it's gaining a lot of traction, and it would create a lot of the legal rights as well as the restitution, and it funds service providers to provide that support. And truthfully, that would be the funding for a national traffic safety movement if it ever became traffic safety advocacy movement, if it ever, if we ever had it in New York and then we could use that as a model for something at the federal level, I would say that's our path to creating, a true national street safety victim-led movement. My background is working in and running large social service organizations. Before my son was killed, that's what I did for 20 some odd years. And, I worked for a $90 million nonprofit organization on the senior management team. And I'm shocked to find out, if we added up all the little nonprofits that exist around street safety, it doesn't even total that for the entire country. And I would say that's why we don't have change. There is nobody pushing back against the business interests who don't want the side guards or don't want to, mandate speed limiters because it's going to, raise the cost of automobiles. So the automobile industry pushes back. There is nobody fighting.
Okay, so that's
why
interests
are opposing the things that, would result in safety.
Great. Okay, so does anybody else want to, that hasn't had an opportunity to say something?
Hi, I was late to the party. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
My name is Sarah Jo Wright. I live in Middletown, Ohio, and 2.5 years ago, 30 seconds after I left my driveway, a semi broadsided me and ran over the trunk the front of my car. So that's how I got involved. I don't know what I'm doing, but I'm here and I can speak rather well and write. In my professional life, I work in compliance in regards to insurance regulation. So I have some experience with that. But otherwise, I'm rather new, but I'm available and I can work and be used.
Thank you, Sarah Jo.
So I'll just say a couple of words. My name is Lois Durso, and I lost, many of you know my story. I lost my 26-year-old daughter because of a side underride. And if there had been a guard there, like in Eric Hines' case, Roya would have been alive today. Her car would have been deflected. So one of the things that had been mentioned is litigation, and I totally agree with that. I think that's really, really important. But also, public awareness, I think, is really, really important, and kind of getting the media to report, in the case of truck underride, to report these kinds of crashes accurately. I think that will, we could get a lot of traction off of that. So I know, Eric, you had talked before about the idea that when Eric heard Marianne and myself talking on NPR, you know, he actually decided that he would go back to his lawyer and see if there's anything that he would be able to do with the underride part of the case with the trucking industry or the trailer manufacturer, and he had a very positive result. So, you know, again, just talking about it and media public awareness through the media is, I think, really important.
If I could just chime in one more, Lois, I thank you again for bringing up the point of lawsuits. One thing I did want to flag for everyone is there is a state-by-state effort that is going on to really limit the ability of families and survivors to actually get any kind of real adequate recovery. For example, in Texas, there's a bill that effectively is going to make it so that it's really hard to sue the trucking company for any kind of safety problems or deficiencies they have, and really only make it so that the driver is the only party that can be held responsible. So, you know, we've been active in working with like Texas Watch to help, you know, fight back against that effort. But there is definitely a state by state. We know there's stuff happening in Iowa as well, where the trucking industry is going through and really trying to push efforts to make it that much harder for families and survivors in court to hold the companies accountable. So, you know, we'll continue to keep everyone on this call, you know, if you're interested, updated on those efforts and how we're fighting against them. But obviously, if something happens in your state, and I believe actually, I think there's some stuff also happening in Florida, it's important for victims and families to speak out and talk about how these bills, which are often labeled as tort reform, are really just hurting families and helping businesses not be accountable for bad behavior and unsafe practices. So we'll keep you guys updated. But from my like top of my head, I know Texas and Iowa right now, they're dealing with some efforts to limit those abilities to use lawsuits to hold companies accountable.
Thank you, Harry. And that just brings up, you know, I know probably all of you are connected in some way or another with others, but how important that is to be sharing resources with one another and alerting one another, and, you know, being willing to tweet out somebody else's thing. Like Lois and I went to a National Safety Council training workshop for survivor advocates. And one thing I really felt like was just a lot of the people were there because of distracted driving or texting or that sort of thing. And there's just, you know, a camaraderie that comes from a shared problem. But when you get together, that builds strength, you know, and it allows you to connect together. And so if nothing else, we can do that, right? We can, I don't know where else we would go from here besides, you know, continuing to share with one another. You know, is there one voice in this country that we can look to, that we can call on for this? I don't know. I'm feeling really frustrated right now, and I don't know where to go, because
how could we get commercials on TV to make public awareness, to educate the public on all of this? Maybe that's where we have to start, is maybe making some commercials and getting them up on every national news feed we can do.
Yeah, that's one of the,
yeah.
One of the
that-
things that I feel like, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to just say that I think that the public cares about safety. And I think, to make this a national issue and just make sure that we get that public awareness that, every time they use the roadways, these are the things that can happen. I think that that's powerful.
And I think, go ahead.
Sorry, Marianne.
Go ahead.
Yeah,
Jay?
I'm Jay Rosenberg. Kathy is my sister-in-law. It was my wife and daughter who passed away 2.5 years ago. Underride, truck wasn't visible. The driver shouldn't have been out on loan. I mean, I can give you a litany of all the things that should not have happened that did happen that caused the tragedy. I also want to just thank Harry for bringing out what Texas Watch and HB 19 in Texas. This legislation we're trying to stop from being enacted. I did testify on that, and it's hard to say. It's hard to go. My concern is seeing how things happen, and I agree all these things are important. Public service announcements, getting the public on our side. There's a lot, and I don't want to minimize by calling it noise because it's not noise, it's all important, but there's a lot of voices out there for a lot of causes that are urgent. And sometimes it's very hard to break through that because there are so many urgent issues in the world. And this is in no way to minimize the urgency of what we're fighting for, because I think it's part of that whole mosaic. I'm sort of with Marianne and some of the voices I heard. If we could get a nonpartisan, traffic safety czar or ombudsman or somebody who understands the system and can work it and make it prioritize, like can walk, who can view, like, look at these bills that are being trying to be enacted, that are sponsored by, strong lobbyists and strong special interest groups for their own reasons, and maybe can fight against that and to, own the issues of safety in the country as a whole and be able to drill down, as a go-to person. I really think that could have a much bigger impact because so many things fall through the cracks. So many individuals that's not their number one priority will agree and offer support, but it doesn't carry across the goal line. And that's what we need. I really do think we need somebody to say, and trucking industry or an advocate that Marianne is proposing, it's not going to be one issue either. It's not going to be just, side guards, which are critical, and front guards, which are critical, and improve safety and all of that. It's going to be a broader spectrum of just improving highway safety and traffic safety now and ongoing in a variety of things. How we accomplish that, how we get, maybe getting, because of his shared tragedy, maybe Joe, appealing to Joe Biden and his staff saying, can you appoint somebody like this? Cut out Congress in that sense. Have him say, this is a national priority. This is still going on. We're seeing way too many deaths in a country that shouldn't be having these tragedies. And, maybe pointing out how other countries have improved and we're falling behind, whether it's part of the whole infrastructure push in terms of improving quality of our highways and so forth. But, getting him to say, I can pick somebody to do that and who can work with the Department of Transportation and Pete Buttigieg and so forth. Maybe some sort of campaign along those lines. I agree the public and getting the public on our side is important. I just have a feeling that they're too inundated with causes.
Thanks, Jay. And you reminded me, I've gotten several emails over the last 8 years from somebody who's got a somewhat related issue to truck underride, but he feels like we've gotten more progress on what we've done, and he's frustrated. He wants me to help him get his pushed, and I'm like,
Right.
but you know, that's part of why it's like, I think you're so right. There's so many competing causes, and I thank you for catching the vision. Bill, do you have, you know, you've worked in the government. Do you have any thoughts on whether something like this could even work? I mean, I don't want to put you on the spot, but I do want to put you on the spot. You're on mute. Oh, okay, sorry.
I'm here. Geez, I go back 40 years working on these issues, helping Mothers Against Drunk Driving get off the ground back in 1980 when I was working as a congressional aide, and kind of stuck with it over the years, including being part of the crash organization, which was, I guess, renamed the Truck Safety Coalition later, and organized a campaign as a public affairs consultant to Citizens for Reliable and Safe Highways to address truck underride, and I called it "Stop the Roving Guillotines," and it was a public relations campaign to support a public policy initiative to get DOT back in the 1990s to improve the federal standard for the rear guard, for the rear impact guards. And worked with Judy Stone, Jackie Gillen, Jerry Donaldson, a lot of those folks back then on that initiative. And so I later became a member of the Maryland General Assembly for 12 years to work on a lot of these kinds of injury prevention issues, among other things. And then went to work for President Obama at U.S. Department of Transportation as a deputy administrator at Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration, which is where I met Mary Ann and her family, and did what I could to open doors so that Mary Ann's voice could be heard by FMCSA leadership and staff, and also the folks upstairs in the office of the secretary, because Mary Ann's tragedy was very emblematic of these continuing tragedies all the time. And Lois, I met you as well around that time. So the tragedies continue. There's been progress, but it sure as heck ain't enough. My view on the idea of an ombudsman is that it would be helpful. It would be helpful to have that, someone engaged, whether it's in the White House or my belief it should be in government, at the U.S. Department of Transportation, who truly, has some independence, like an ombudsman at a newspaper, at least back in the days when they may have had them. I don't know anymore, but you can go to that person who would listen and be empathetic and be able to go to leadership at a newspaper about why they're not covering something or how they're covering it. That's not right. So, as much as I'd like to say that outside of government makes sense, it doesn't. It in the past hasn't proven to work because it's just a lot of spinning of the wheels. The wheels that turn are really within government, like it or not. Congress has, the reins over transportation, national transportation policy, national transportation budgets, billions and billions of dollars these days. And U.S. Department of Transportation oversees these policies. And so, if you're really looking for, the hub of the wheel, it really is within the federal government. It's not a 50-state patchwork quilt, whack-a-mole kind of thing. That will never work. in our lifetimes or great grandchildren's lifetimes. You know, it just ain't going to happen state by state. It takes a united effort. These are the United States, and so there are ways to advance these ideas. MAD was the game changer in drunk driving. Little was done about it, except cops testifying before congressional and state legislative panels and getting no help for what they were seeing out on the roadways. But MAD and people just like you who've been working through your grief make a huge difference. If it, you know, it's the MAD, I think, blueprint that is something for you to look at, because it was those personal stories like what you're doing, combined with people who are working the halls of Congress and White House, combined with engaging the media. Media's changed a lot. Back in the day, a public service campaign made some difference. These days, you know, it's all blown up into a million pieces, our media. And so it involves an extraordinary effort to reach the people you need to reach, to change the minds of people whose minds need to be changed, behaviors need to be changed, laws and regulations need to be changed. So it's a combination. I think your best approach for an ombudsman is with a Biden administration, which is an administration that I think has more empathy for such things, has more experience dealing with these kinds of issues, has an understanding how government can make a difference when it's running, when it's working right. And you know, there is for instance, one way that MAD was able to get things going, not recommending this necessarily, but one of the first things they did right out of the box, their first national press conference, in fact, which I organized for them at the U.S. Capitol in 1980, was not only calling for federal legislation to crack down on states that weren't doing the right thing when it came to drunk driving, but they called on President Carter to appoint a blue ribbon commission to get to the bottom of the drunk driving tragedy. Called it the neglected national disgrace, and you know, a national epidemic. And Carter lost, and the next year they called on President Reagan to appoint it, and it was a difficult process to get him to do it, but we got him to appoint that blue ribbon commission, which really set into motion a pretty bipartisan effort that led to a lot of change, including the national 21 minimum drinking age law, which would have legislation that would have withheld funds from any state that didn't do it. And we were talking about Ronald Reagan signing that bill, and he was Mr. States' Rights. He ran on anti-government platform. He told people, don't trust government, don't believe government. It's all about volunteerism, and except for defense, you know, government really shouldn't be in your lives. Well, these moms changed his mind about that, and he embraced that 21 drinking age law. And Elizabeth Dole had quite a bit to do with it. Mothers Against Drunk Driving had a lot to do with it, and all the media around their efforts had a lot to do with it. And so that set a lot of things up for change at the federal level and the state level. But you know, so you know, this year there is I think, relatively fast-moving, probably $1 trillion transportation infrastructure bill that's going to move forward. And you know, a major part of the, you know, I think a major cornerstone will be, you know, how we fund transportation infrastructure in a way that that helps us with our environmental goals, and that's cool. But you know, every transportation secretary, you know, I think any elected official at any level of government says when it comes to transportation, safety is our #1 priority. Everyone's said it since the 60s, and they'll continue to say it. But so, you know, groups like yours need to hold their feet to the fire on that, and to make sure that safety is the bottom line, you know, foundational piece of this, let's say, $1 trillion multi-year highway bill that they're going to be cranking out this year, I believe, in Congress. On, you know, so in that bill can be provisions. This is one approach, provisions to, for instance, reflecting the, Stop Underride Act. I mean, that could be folded into it depending on who your champions are and if they can work it into the legislation. An idea of an ombudsman also potentially could be language that you could have, some member of Congress, Senate and House advocate for that kind of language into the highway bill. So the idea of a freestanding bill to do this probably won't work, but it's a good way to get the attention of members of Congress, the public, and the press. But you ultimately, I think this year would want to look to put such language into the highway bill. And so, that's the House Transportation and Infrastructure Committee, Peter DeFazio chair, and also the Senate Commerce, Science and Transportation Committee, which is chaired by Maria Cantwell, Senator Cantwell of Washington State. So Marianne and I've had numerous conversations about those committees and such, and I'm sure others of you are not unfamiliar with those two key committees that oversee this federal policy. So I do recommend that you try to find a renewed commitment to safety and to a truly vision zero set of policies by working with this still new administration and this Congress that seems to be gung-ho on passing a highway bill this year.
So would you recommend going the legislative route versus trying to get Biden to issue a memorandum to set it up? Or
I would consider both, a two-track system, two-track approach to appeal to
both ways.
Yeah, and also to at the same time see if you can get whatever language that makes the most sense, that really would do the job, get it into policy. So it's not just a suggestion and a request, becomes policy. This is something that the federal government will have to do, some sort of maybe cross agency initiative, transportation, health and human services, all the ones that Marianne, you've been talking about, Justice Department. I don't know exactly, but yeah.
It's kind of is it kind of like a pipe dream here, kind of a pie in the sky goal? Because we're all working on our individual things, and
well, that's just it. I think individually you have to ask yourself. I mean, there's power in numbers. There's power in people who've been victimized by this, and reaching out to finding a champion among the people who represent you is really what you need. So without you, it's not going anywhere. But with you, there's a chance. Yeah, it's a fighting chance. And it's a boulder uphill always. So it's it may be pie in the sky, but I've seen a lot of victories along the way that wouldn't have happened if it wasn't for people who suffered, who decided instead to stand up. So it definitely can be done, but you've got to be strategic. You've got to combine your efforts. You have to make decisions about, based on your resources, what can you really do? Can you do more than one big thing in a given year?
Well, okay, so everybody that's left here is mostly truck safety, it looks like here. As you've been describing, it's like a prime time right now you know, so,
Yeah.
you know, we're obviously have a good chance of getting the underride legislation into the infrastructure bill.
Yeah.
So is it foolish to try and push for this at the same time?
No, it's not, but you need a champion.
Right.
You need a champion.
Yeah.
I'd also add that I think given, you know, there's going to be a lot of things being put into the infrastructure bill and not all of them safety, it may be, you know, if pushing this, you know, shouldn't take away from any of our efforts on underride, for example, you know. So I think if we're going into an office, you know, making sure that as much of underride gets into the infrastructure bill as possible, I think is, you know, a good thing. The language that got into the HR2 wasn't as strong as it could have been. So
right.
I think we also have to be mindful of the fact that, yeah, we have good support for underride right now, but we need to make sure that going into conference, as much of it stays intact as possible. So I think that's just something to be mindful of in terms of, you know, if we're going into an office and we sort of have one ask and it's to say, hey, you really haven't taken a position on underride, and who knows, it might be an office that ends up being like one of the conference members. Do we ask them, you know, hey, can you really make a push to make sure most of underride gets in? Or, you know, this other ask for, you know, a traffic safety ombudsman. Yeah. So that's something I would be mindful of, because there are only going to be, you know, so many priorities that each office brings in. So in thinking about the overall infrastructure bill, I want to be mindful of that, where it's like what ultimately ends up getting in.
I hear you loud and clear, Harry. And just so you know, Harry talked with Lois and I the day we decided to draft the underride bill. So Harry's got lots of good ideas. But if it's always, you know, tyranny of the urgent, that's, you know, that's why there hasn't been an ombudsman, because there's always that thing that needs it, and this thing that needs it, and this thing needs it.
So one of the things I think would be a good first step, though, is you know, in order, because ultimately, you know how this works with like going to a member and they give you the runaround.
Yep.
So I think maybe you should talk to, you know, someone on committee, like reach out to Helena, and see where she is on this, because the reality is, if the chairman isn't, you know, going to have an appetite for this, I think that makes it more difficult. So that might be a good first step if we're actually looking to get a legislative champion for it. But even before then, like having a firm idea of what it would be in terms of like answering that question, is it inside government or outside? Because if it's outside government, it makes it arguably a little more difficult to set up than say something in government, I think, just legislatively wise.
Right.
But answering some of those questions, and then I'd say talking to the committee, because if they're like, yeah, you know what, if you guys have something and can find a member, sure, we'll entertain it. Or it's like, nah, the chairman doesn't want it, and it's going to be an uphill battle. And I think that might be a good way to gauge, you know, the legislative fight.
Yeah, because when I first drafted that National Traffic Safety Act and the ombudsman part of it, that was in the fall of 2019. And that was right before the election where the Dems got the House, right? So, because I took it around, like Lois was, why are you talking about that? We got to talk about underwrite. So I just went and had my own meetings.
I just, and you know, just to jump off of Harry's point, that, you know, I just felt like, you know, when we went into these offices, I thought maybe it was more effective to bring up one thing rather than two things. So.
Yeah, and I will just say from our experience, Lois, like, you know, we've honed it down to like 4 main issues that we really focus in on. But like, even when we go into an office, it's like the staffer only writes so much, and it's like if you give them all 4, as much as sometimes it's like, yeah, you have a buffet. It's like, yeah, then they say, you know what, I'm not really hungry, and it's like, but if it's one where you can sort of hook them and they say, you know what, follow up, and you can break through. So I do think that with these offices, and it's complicated by the fact that we're doing meetings now on phone and Zoom. So I just think there's something important to be said about what ultimately got into HR2 last time. And that should sort of be a marker for us to say, we still have advocacy work to do on underride as it relates to what gets into the infrastructure bill. Because I want stronger language on side, you know.
Yeah, we've been working on it.
Yeah,
I think
so we're all in agreement on that, but it's like that's going to take us going into offices as well to say, hey, last time around this got watered down and it shouldn't be. And we're also just pushing other issues as well. So we're mindful of just like our bandwidth and then the congressional offices bandwidths, especially as how it's affected by the pandemic and how we're doing meetings now.
Yeah, you know what? I'm so sick of it.
Do you think that's going to change, Harry, anytime soon?
Yeah, I have to say DC is sort of a crap show as it relates to vaccines. Mm-hmm. But I think, in the next like 2 months, things are really going to start opening up. I have some friends on the Hill and I know some of them have already gotten their first dose. So, with them getting their second, they'll all probably start going back into the office. And if it's not every day, it'll probably be something to the effect of like, I'm in on, Tuesday and Thursdays and, other people are in Monday, Wednesday, Friday kind of thing.
So, all these issues, I still say you need somebody. Thank you. And like Jay, I think you caught the vision. You need somebody that's going to be there and standing up for the victims, so it's not always such a battle. I mean, I don't expect it to go away entirely, but for whatever reason, I have this dual burden for both underride and getting more overarching. So thank you guys for meeting today. And I don't know where we're going to go from here.
This is Jay. Can I make one suggestion? Maybe we can, Mary Ann and anyone who else wants to be involved, is focus on a impactful one-page letter to Joe Biden. Mm-hmm. I think anything longer than one page tends to get distracted.
I agree. By the way, I completely agree. One page is like the limit for letters nowadays.
And with a second page of like as many signatures of people who have been involved with this as possible as the initial impetus to start this going. And then, maybe a couple of things of outlining why we think this is critical and a proposed next step. Can he appoint a staff member who'd be willing to spend some time talking to us about it or things like that, just to get the ball rolling. I'm not sure all the machinations that take place for getting something like this started, but I would imagine catching the eye of somebody who then would be passionate about it to work with us.
So rather than actually ask him to set it up, ask him to
well, we'll say this is our goal. Our goal is to have an ombudsman or a czar or whatever you want to call it that's going to be responsible for this umbrella issue.
Representing victims of traffic violence. Okay.
Exactly. And putting that together and then say, okay, we'd like to work on this as quickly as possible. We understand from firsthand the pain that you've suffered and that we've suffered, at an emotional level, and then acknowledging his busyness, but the urgency of it. So, is there somebody on your staff that can work with us that we can push this through to get this a realization as soon as possible type of situation?
Okay, so how about I draft something and send it out to everybody and get reactions and feedback, and we'll see where it goes from there. Thank you for that suggestion. When Lois and I started drafting the underride bill, we had it out in 2 weeks, right, Lois?
Back and forth, right?
So, yeah. All right.
The first version.
Yes.
And then we started passing it out, I don't know, within what, 2-3 weeks?
Yes.
After drafting it. Yeah.
So, okay.
Well, thanks so much for setting this up, Marianne. I actually have to hop off for a meeting, but thank you guys, and it was
All right.
great seeing everyone.
Okay, you too. All right, everybody have a great
Thank
day.
you, everyone. Thank you,
Thank
Mary
you.
Ann. Thank you,
Bye-bye.
everyone, for participating.
Thank you.
Thank you.